Hi, I'm Tamara, the editor of Blackout Magazine, and this is your Blackout Report. So, because we know that so much of this information is incredibly difficult to digest, also because we care about your mental health and ours, um, we typically try to give you a combination of wins and losses. It's important. It is so hard to consume information constantly with battles and not wins because it skews you into feeling like this is a losing battle. It is not. However, there are a lot more L's than W's in this report, but we urge you to still lock in and pay attention because even though these are initial losses, that does not mean that they cannot become court battles. So we just want to frame it with that before I start talking to make sure that you are, one, in a good place to be listening, but also that you're paying attention. We have to know what's going on in order to be prepared and to fight back from it. So, with that being said, this is not a super positive report, but it's news that we need to know and it's things that we need to be paying attention to. All right, you with me? But let's start out with a bright spot. In Connecticut, the United States District Court for the District of Connecticut has been hearing a case against Aetna. Aetna had been denying claims for facial feminization surgery for their transitioning patients. And the court decided that this was actually an act of sex discrimination and those blocking those treatments was unjust. And a quote from the Senior Counsel at Advocates for Trans Equality, Kelly Perry Johnson said, in granting the preliminary injunction, the court recognized the serious harms caused by denying access to transition-related health care, blocking Aetna from continuing to enforce its exclusion of transition-related facial surgeries against our clients while the case proceeds. This decision is an important step towards ensuring that trans people are not denied medically necessary care simply because of who they are. For too long, insurers have relied on the outdated and discriminatory policies that put trans people's health and safety at risk. We are proud to stand with our clients as this case moves forward. This is a win, and it also could set precedent, which is always a good thing. That means that other case battles around the country could use this to say that this is what took place there and have that as evidence in their cases. Good news. In other news, the Supreme Court rules on a challenge to the California Safety Act, which allowed for schools and teachers to not disclose information about a child's social transitioning, pronoun use, and gender identity to parents. The Supreme Court, which was a split decision with the conservative justices taking majority, basically said that schools would be required to inform parents. Obviously, this means that children who are not from supportive homes and in affirming spaces could not only have that information disclosed to their parents, which would put them in uncomfortable situations. It could also put their safety at risk. Another one we are watching, this is a proposal by the Department of Health and Human Services, but has not yet gone into effect, but is one we are keeping our eyes on, and you should as well. During the Biden administration, there was a policy that ruled over foster care and youth in care and services that basically required three conditions for a foster care placement. That one, the family had to establish an environment that supports the child's LGBTQ plus status or identity. Two, undergo training for appropriate knowledge and skills to provide for the needs of the child related to the child's self-identified sexual orientation or gender identity, gender expression. And three, commit to facilitate the child's access to age or developmentally appropriate resources, services, and activities to support their health and well-being. It has been proposed that be rolled back and that not be a thing on the basis of religious persecution, I suppose. They're saying that families whose religious beliefs oppose the concept of transness or queerness should not be eliminated from receiving foster care placements, which obviously, if there is a disproportionate number of LGBTQ kids in the system seeking homes and families, and so that means that those children could potentially be placed in families that are not affirming, not supportive of their transition, and getting them the appropriate care and therapeutic or medical services to support said transition or just their declaration of their sexual identity. In Texas, there is a 2023 bill, Senate Bill 14, that limited healthcare providers from providing transition services, gender affirming services for trans youth. That has been in effect. However, the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, has recently added, clarified, made a statement that says that this also includes mental health care providers, so professional counselors, marriage therapists, psychologists, social workers, basically threatening that if they provide any sort of care for gender dysphoria, anything that aids transitioning youth, that they will be considered a violation and could lose their medical license. Opposing side is basically saying that you can't do that. What a therapist talks about with their patient is HIPAA protected. It also, there's some free speech questions, whether that's a violation there as well. And any provider is sworn to an oath to help and not harm their patients. And by ignoring medical diagnosis and treating them, talk therapy, providing talk therapy, they would be doing harm. Although this Attorney General put out this clarifying statements, it remains to be seen whether that can even be upheld or if it's even accurate, whether the Attorney General even has the right to make such a claim. Yes, he is not a healthcare provider. And basically what it's going to do, and likely the goal, was to just scare providers from providing the care, the much needed care. They were threatened to lose their license. They were threatened to lose funding. The way that most health services work is that the doctor provides a service and then they bill Medicaid or the insurance company to then receive their payment back for said services. And they are threatening that those paybacks will not happen, which will basically cut off that income from the provider. The communications director of the Equality Texas, Jonathan Gooch, said, in no uncertain terms, trans young people die as a result of this. Access to medical health care will become more complicated for some of the most marginalized people in our state, Gooch said. To be messing with care for suicidal ideation amongst a population who face disproportionately high suicidal ideation is not just dangerous, it's morally without method. And one of the pieces of information that's coming through legislatively that is possibly one of the most concerning, not that all of these are not incredibly concerning, is the actions that are being taken right now in response to President Trump's original executive order limiting the ability for federal prisoners to be able to continue or maintain their transitions while incarcerated. So the executive order had come out quite a while ago that we reported on that said that these transitions were going to be limited, that stop people from having gender affirming undergarments, makeup, etc. They disallowed gender affirming surgeries of any sort. Most recently, we reported on the fact that folks that weren't already under medical care for transitioning would not be allowed to transition within federal facilities. This newest guidance is coming out that's being employed despite the fact that there have been significant legal challenges that have actually put a stop on many of the things that the executive order proposed due to lawsuits and litigation. This is now ordering, and the Federal Bureau of Prisons is starting the implementation of weaning inmates, incarcerated individuals of the trans experience from being able to receive the hormone medical interventions that they are already receiving. This can have catastrophic physical and mental health implications. Not only does this obviously psychologically affect the folks that are being affected here, it could have incredible physical issues that come along with weaning off people who are no longer creating naturally occurring hormones. Imagine someone who has a medical condition and then is pulled off of their medication. The fix by the administration and by the Bureau of Prisons is to offer psychological care, mental health medication to treat gender dysphoria, opposed to providing any sort of medical support for transitioning. And again, this is folks that are already on these medications and may have been on for an indiscriminate amount of years. So there's even possibilities of like actual physical withdrawal symptoms that go beyond just psychological and mental health and go into cardiovascular problems, immune deficiency issues, higher risk of heart issues, and even potentially diabetes. So this is a huge thing. We, I'm sure, are going to see it taken up in court once again as the litigation continues. And a lot of this litigation has been successful. So we will see how this plays out. However, we are very concerned about how this will affect incarcerated folks with the trans experience that are dealing with these situations currently. There was also an executive order that forced folks to be moved to prisons that correspond with their gender at birth. However, that was stopped by litigation, and those movements into those other facilities have been stopped by court intervention. So the same thing could potentially happen with this, but it's happening. There are approximately 700 transmasculine inmates, incarcerated individuals that exist in the federal prison system, and about 1,600 trans feminine incarcerated folks that exist within the prison system that this will affect. I want to say about 700 or 800 of them are actually on medical interventions, and so it's a small percentage of the larger population, but it's still a great deal of people. Again, this only applies to federal facilities, not state and local facilities. However, every time these things happen, there are waves that affect all of the other populations that are even closely related. So that is another one that we are watching, and you should be watching too.